The second slide. Okay, so we're going to highlight tonight making football sustainable, real football in the capital. So let's start off firstly with the general Q&A. So this is any questions you have about how the club's run, anything we've done. We will have some breaking news in this session tonight. I've obviously got Danny and Martin with me, so willing to discuss anything. Yeah.
Come on, Dennis.
Right, this one's a better mic.
Just throw my voice. Right, you ready?
Yeah.
What we carry a lot of staff regarding, obviously, as our first team, but on the younger players, the academy as such, we seem to mimic the same amount of staff. Now, we are a second division club. Obviously, we have a budget. We have to watch what we spend or what comes in. Now, people don't work for nothing. So what I'm saying is there's an awful lot of money that's going out on representative staff as like first team, you got and the second and the younger side, it's got the same sort of staff. A lot of people here, isn't there?
Right, okay, so we're going to talk about that later on.
Yeah.
We're going to show you some, is this mic better?
That's about it.
Yeah. We're going to show you later on the breakdown of revenue, and we're happy to even talk about the cost breakdown. But we do have obviously a lot of staff and a lot of cost involved in developing young players, and that will come up later on.
I'll just answer a little bit of it. In terms of the youth team staff, you've got no choice because you have to add the staff in place to get the funding of the Football League. So if you haven't got the right number of staff, then you don't get the funding. So we've got no choice in that. It has to be that amount of numbers.
Yeah, just one thing. If Lewis Spencer, who does a great job running it, was here, we are a Category 3. I asked him the question this afternoon, if we went up to be a Category 2, how much would it cost? And we estimate about another 1.2 million a year. Yeah, please.
The only thing about that, which is obviously correct what Martin said, but these Premier clubs, I mean, we've lost another player, they seem to come back and nitpick our player or younger kids, and they appear to take them, and we can't say we want that for it. He's coming or going.
All right, so let's just talk about that. And Martin, I'll have a go, and then you jump in.
Yeah.
So, right, everyone interested in the academy?
Yes. Nigel, it might be worthwhile setting context to say Category 3 versus Category 2, what's the difference?
Okay, all right, we'll do that. All right, so let me start off with what I know, and then Martin will fill in the gaps. So, the first thing you need to know, this time last year we told all the academy families that the academy may have to go. I think you remember that. And I think we did the right thing. We tried to be very honest, truthful, because this is their futures. We had all the kids in. We explained that there may be no academy because we've been in the National League. Fortunately, that didn't happen. So Lewis has restocked the coaches. I talked to him this afternoon. He's very happy with what we got. And we start the academy at under 8s. Correct?
No, under 9s.
Under 9s, and it goes all the way up from under 9, under 10, and so on to under 18. So, if you want to ever see these, they play in Woodford, and the under 18s play on Saturday, everyone else plays on Sunday. So I'd encourage you to go and see it at the Whitbread training ground. Lewis, I asked Lewis this afternoon, how do you feel about the total academy quality of talent? And we'll get later on in the presentation about how much money the club's made over the years from the academy, but basically we want to maximise the amount of talent. So there are different levels of category, as we just heard. Martin, do you mind describing how you go from one to the other?
One to the other, I don't know the exact breakdown. I know you're going to need more staff, and you've got to have a covered area in terms of a 3G covered area. So in terms of training facilities, it's all to do with facilities is the big thing. and then you know you've got to have certain members of staff. I think it's about 3 or 4 different members of staff what you ain't got at Cat 3. But the big thing is, let's say, is facilities.
But what does it give you being a Cat 2 versus?
Well, that's yeah. There's there's no answer to that really. It gives you. You're supposed to have better quality boys.
Exactly.
You play a better quality of opposition. Yeah. I think for us, over the last 10 years, our academy has paid for itself because of the talent we've sold. You know, we've sold over £3 million worth of talent over the last 10 years, and if you work that out each year, that's £300,000. Yeah, it's gone off now, that one. So we're very happy how it goes. Going back to the EPPP, EPPP is totally loaded to the Premier League clubs. I got better money for the players I sold last year because we was outside the EPPP than the players that have gone this year. Like the lots of one to Chelsea, for instance, and the lad was only with us for 18 months. EPPP, that £3 million that we've took over the last 10 years was pre-EPPP, so to repeat that now, I think it'll be a lot more difficult. It's all, as I say, it's all based on how long you've been at the club. You get a certain amount for each year. You get more 9 to 9. If you take the boy at 9 to 12, you get a certain amount. I can't remember the exact figures, and then it goes up from 13 to 16. Unfortunately, the boy that we just sold to Chelsea, we've only had him 18 months. But we feel it's a productive, because if you look at our squad at the moment, we've got 10 of the boys that are in the squad that started in our academy, and that works twofold. One is, obviously, we hope to sell a couple of them on in the future, and two, if you look at your wage structure, they're going to be to the bottom of it, you know, because they're coming through, so that's just how it works.
Yeah, I guess to pick up on your question, and I guess the nub of this is the 1.2 million to go to a Category 2 academy going to pay off as an investment or not?
We don't believe so. I mean, Colchester have done it. I don't think that it would make us any better and any more productive, if I'm totally honest. I don't think it's worth that type of investment. And the problem is at the moment, because our facilities are just about acceptable for Cat 3, we're a million miles away from being Cat 2, to be totally honest. So that's Lewis's dream, but as I always say to Lewis, I think it's a bit of a pipe dream at the moment.
And the 1.2 is the facility upgrade?
Yeah, so you have to have that dome, the artificial pitch.
Yeah.
Now, to answer your question, I think if Lewis was here, he would say, if you've got a kid you've identified, and they're choosing between us, Category 2, or us, Category 3, the parents take the view that going to Category 2 is better. So I think the answer to your question is you potentially get better people.
Yeah, possibly.
But it's possibly.
Yeah, I'm not convinced by that.
Can I just ask a question actually? The commentary that's done for the stream on TV, is it the same commentary that you get on the audio?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because obviously that's a very difficult thing to do. It's a different skill commentating on something that you're watching live as opposed to relaying everything that's going on over an audio.
Yeah.
So, you know, my wife started watching it. She said, like, you know, I can't bear this because it's just continuous talking about everything. I said, but it's, you know, they're also doing the audio, so it's a difficult balance.
So you raise a really interesting question. So obviously I see most games streamed. I personally will be happy not to have the audio because I like to watch and think and occasionally complain to Martin about various things.
Of course.
Never happens, does it?
Never.
But Kent, who obviously didn't grow up with the game, complains as soon as there's no commentary. And I think the other thing, in this country, we're used to commentary for TV. In the States, if I take the New England Revolution, they have the synchronized audio and visual at the same time. So it is a very common thing in the States to do that. I think all I can say is you can always turn the sound off, but then you miss the pitch noise. And it's too, I did ask my son, who's David, the expert behind all this, and if we could just have the pitch noise, it's just too complicated to do it. But basically, earlier in the year we had some synchronization issues where one was ahead or behind, and it's very frustrating to hear the ball's gone in the net and not see it. But I think we worked through all that. So we'll come back to the academy in a minute. Any other comments on streaming?
You know how to do it.
Yeah.
You've got every game anyway, you don't need to worry.
By the
Show
way,
you one
for
night.
those who don't know, it's all on here now. And one thing I don't understand myself, because I have both going at the same time, this is faster than the one on my laptop or my big computer. Right, just back on the academy.
I'll just say one thing on the streaming. So thanks for those that are watching. But yeah, we took just under 200 to crew. We had 600 around the world watch it. That's only 1 in 5 of what's at a game. So there's a lot of people out there that aren't watching it. It is genuinely great value. Yes, £10. If we were in charge of it, might be slightly different in price, but it's the EFL that set it. So there's 80% of you, if you like, aren't watching the game that are here on a Saturday home game at the stadium. So there's an awful lot of word spreading. We make 92% of that money, and clearly that money goes, as we'll discuss later, to try and reduce the bottom line loss. It's a key revenue driver for the club. So if you're watching, great, but the person sitting next to you probably isn't watching. So on Saturday week, mentioning it, and it helps a huge amount to club revenue. We're making more money than some League One clubs from it, but we want to make what Championship clubs are making for it. We can do that with your help.
And for those who haven't watched it, we do have replays, commentary as we heard, a lot of discussion about Leyton Orient. You can tweet in, so it's highly interactive. So back on the academy, Lewis has got this vision of taking us higher. I'm personally delighted with the progress we've made. I think, based on what Lewis tells me, we've got a lot of really good young players. I'd encourage you all to try and get out one Sunday. I think they kick off at 11 to go and see the under 11s, 12s, 13s. We don't tend to publicise it, but you will probably go there and be surrounded by scouts from Spurs and Chelsea and everyone else, because that's how they look at talent. I think you had a question over there.
My own question was, with regard to the commentary on listening rather than watching,
Yeah.
how come it comes up on Sky before it comes up on the radio?
Okay. Very good question.
On your phone or
Yeah,
wherever.
I think with this, me and Martin, we have the sort of live updates. Clearly, we're at every game, but it comes through on our phone sometimes before it's hit the back of the net. And literally, someone from the press association, Dan will testify this. They press literally a button, and that then instantly goes on to Sky Sports. So, in the time that has gone up to a satellite for the commentary, the ball's already back on the centre circle in reality.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's just every football club. It's annoying, but yeah, there ain't a way around it at the moment. And there's basically a 45-second delay in the video stream, and that is an EFL rule that has to be, that there is that latency annoyingly in it. We'd like it to be live.
Most people probably don't realise that your TV is actually delayed anyway. I mean, Martin and I have been on TV a lot, but if you go on any channel anywhere in the world, there's usually 5 to 10 second delay. That's in case you come out with some abusive language. So Martin, they always give a bit longer, and me a bit less. But if you remember when Amazon were doing their Premier League games before Christmas, there was a lot of complaints about people seeing the score with them. It's for the reason that Danny said, because it has to go up and back down. Right, next question.
One for Danny. Danny, with the score centre being knocked down and new housing going up, have you got plans in place to, attack the numbers that are going to be coming to the area?
Okay, so the question, I was worried you were pointing over there, the school centre. You got me worried. So yeah, we are in consultation with the stakeholders, that's the council, most importantly, Taylor Wimpey, and we want to make sure that the opportunity over there that we fully utilise that, love thy neighbour and all that stuff. There's going to be 4,000, maybe 5,000 residents. We'll sit here in 2027, I think we'll all still be here. 2027, and we will hopefully have a large chunk of those that will come through our doors, not just match day for the season ticket holders, but non-match day for events. And we've got a huge opportunity, but that doesn't just stop there. That's, there's developments up there, there's developments over there, there's developments over there, and we've got to make sure that we up our game in how we engage with those from what we're currently doing. We're making inroads, but a long way to go, and it's an opportunity.
Okay, so going back to our takeover, very time consuming. We had a very difficult person to deal with. Can't say his name because I'd fund the players' Christmas party or something. Due diligence was impossible, so we took a risk. We basically got nothing out of him. We inherited no bank account, you know all this, no players, no training ground, no credit card processing, no season tickets, and a few young players. Now, this is the key point. We all know the history of that. We were lucky because we put our consortium together, which at the time was me, Kent came a bit later in April, Martin was involved very early, Matt Porter, my son, Marshall Taylor was there right from the start, and a couple of other people, Rich Emmett, and we met, again, you know this story, met 5:30 every morning, but we had people like Martin and Matt to help us. Most people who buy football clubs don't, and it's a very strange business. So here's a snapshot of what's going on in Leagues 1 and 2. We already know this, 75% of clubs are losing money, so it's an unsustainable model. Most clubs are reliant on the financing of one individual. Good example is Southend, where Ron Martin has financed the team for what, 15 years?
Give or take.
Bury is another example. And the problem is that if that individual dies, has a business problem, the club is in a bad position. Another model problem is too many clubs rely on making a big profit on player sales every 5 years or so. If you talk to some other clubs in this league, they will say, yeah, we made a profit 2 years ago when we sold so-and-so, but we keep losing money the rest of the time. Most cost structures are too high. Do you think our 7 million is too high? Right, let's do a quick hands vote. Who thinks 7 million, it's just over 7 million, who thinks 7 million is too high? Put your hands up.
It's massive.
Right, put your hands up if you think it's too low. Okay.
It's not spent on players.
Okay, right, so the majority there said it was too high, and it was interesting, we actually had an investor come along, do you remember this? And he said to us, yeah, your attendances need to be higher, you need to spend a lot more on players, you need to spend a lot more on administration. Danny was rubbing his hands, and he wanted to spend a lot more money on everything. Doesn't always pay off, as we've seen from some of these other clubs. I think another issue in football is a lack of creativity and execution in driving revenues. Our conclusion, the model is broken and needs urgent help. Right, quick run through of the Bury situation. And I think this is the last slide before we move on to the next one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, most clubs will follow. Bolton came close. They had cumulative losses of 189 million. While Macclesfield and Southend have not paid wages. We've all read that.
Southend can't pay their VAT.
Southend, by the way, someone said at half time that we couldn't hear all the questions, so I'll repeat things. Southend apparently can't pay their VAT. Is that right?
I can't answer that.
You can't answer that, right. Club sustainability is not a common model. In other words, there is not enough talk in our view about sustainability. The owners and directors test is too easy and involves no personal interaction. Now, going back to your question, wherever it is, about the recruitment of Carl Fletcher. Oh, there you are. anyone can turn up and become an owner and director of a football club. You don't have an interview, you basically fill in some forms. Is that good? No, okay. Right, the previous owner at Bury targeted success and promotion while losing 50,000 a week. Then he hit bad health. Steve Dale failed to provide the financial information to the EFL. I put down there why, we don't know. And apparently Dale could not identify what he was buying from the previous owners because they had a whole series of mortgages on various assets, including the car park. And if you want to know where I got all this information, there's a very good podcast, besides the several podcasts that follow Leighton Orient, like the Orient Hour and the Orient Outlook podcast, and what's the other one you did the other night?
The Lowdown.
The Lowdown. The best one on football finances is called The Price of Football. It's excellent and very informative. Okay, so we're going to do some voting now, right? One more. So in our view, what's wrong with football finances? Financial control, it is very complicated. Very complicated. You've got all these measures, all these things you have to complete for the league. It is very complicated indeed. The second thing is it's very reliant on success on the field. Now, I think the actual content is great, but you need success on the field, and we've had the discussion already about what happens if you aren't successful, you end up firing managers, basically. Poor use of assets like stadiums. Anyone here own a factory? Anyone responsible for a factory? What's your capacity utilisation of that factory?
I'm import and export really. It's about 1,800 square foot. You know, I don't manufacture anything, but
if you had a factory,
Yeah.
you would probably expect to have capacity utilisation 70–80%, right?
yeah, about that. Yeah.
Okay, so we estimate, on a generous estimate, that this place is used 5% of the time.
It needs to be used more.
It needs to be used
Yeah.
more.
Are you differentiating between the building or, God forbid, having a plastic pitch?
Okay, so we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
God
Right?
forbid.
Oh, okay. Unequal spend by clubs in the same league. The clubs who were in League 2 last year thought that Bury cheated their way out the league.
Yeah.
Agree?
Yeah.
Short-term spending at the expense of the future, particularly on players' wages. Again, Bury was an example, Bolton was an example. And then the other thing that happens to some clubs, suddenly you get big bills. We've had big bills for things over on the East Stand. The supporters club have been very generous. Loft have been very generous over time. But you can get very big bills that throw your finances out of whack.
100%.
We're now going to take some more questions, and then we'll take you to the next part of the story. How should clubs be punished for not paying players? Remember recent examples of Macclesfield and Southend.
I think the question's not paying players either full stop or not paying them on time. I think it's both elements, isn't it?
It's both elements, yeah. Because that tends to happen. And sometimes it's also managers. I mean, our understanding is that Macclesfield owe their manager, 2 managers ago, nearly 200 grand. So, what should happen? Should it be a fine or a points deduction? Okay, in my view, you got the right answer there. Nearly 90% points deduction. Next question coming up.
Just on that, given the state of Macclesfield, why aren't they under an embargo in terms of signing any new players when they're not paying existing ones?
Okay, so the question was, why aren't Macclesfield under an embargo?
Wrong, isn't it?
I can't answer the question, I don't know. I've got a view. It could be that the league want them to get to the end of the season, because imagine if they stop now, you'd have to go back and take out all the previous fixtures. So we would get 3 goals back. We wouldn't get any points back, but imagine the mess that would create, because certain teams have played them twice, certain teams may not have played them at all for one reason, but most teams played them once. I think that's why, but I can't say that is the reason.
No, also, I don't think they want 2 to go in the same year. They're desperate to keep them going, I believe.
But the fact that there's the pressure there, you should argue is a good thing, because I think it's going to bring about change. Right, so should the salary cap, now it's this very complicated calculation called SCMP that you've probably never heard of before. It's incredibly complicated, it's tied to revenue, and in our league we can pay up to 50% of our revenue for players. There's some players who are excluded, particularly those under 21. So basically there is a salary cap at 50%. So my question for you, should it be tied to revenue? And at the moment revenue is everything from sponsorship, attendances, it could also be non-match day using this room, but it could also be a loan from Nigel Travis or Kent Teague. It could also be, if we own the stadium, as per Derby County, selling Derby County's stadium for 42 million, and that's added to the numbers. So revenue is a very broad definition. So my question is, should it be tied to revenue or a fixed amount? This is the closest vote we've got, at roughly 50-50, with a slight benefit to tie it to revenue. The problem, and Danny, you may want to talk on this, the problem with that is the definition is so broad, you've got all kinds of clubs currently suing the EFL over the Derby situation, the Birmingham situation, and some clubs even, I think a good example is one club we play in this league whose manager did something that I think was dreadful. You know, that owner constantly puts money in and effectively sponsors the club like a sponsor here at Leyton Orient. So you can boost the revenue line through that.
But surely you can define revenue, so a sale and leaseback deal is adding to your debt as well. So surely it's just a question of being a bit more scientific as what you describe as revenue. So, you know, Danny is obviously not only for the club for himself incentivised to bring in commercial sponsorship, to grow all the other revenue streams, higher attendances, all that is very positive revenue that's growing the club, rather than, you know, just someone, a rich benefactor coming in and putting in money. Surely you can create a formula that rewards commercial success.
Okay, everyone hear that? Yeah, so basically we agree with you 100%. And it's interesting that being in the franchise business in the States, one of the things that changed in the last 2 years, it relates to revenue recognition. In other words, if we sold a piece of land to a franchisee, say, and we'd make a big profit, under the old accounting rules, that could be taken as a one-time number into your profit. Now it has to be spread over the period of the franchise agreement. I think you're absolutely right, that bright minds should be able to make this very fixed, very clear, what's in and what's not in.
You mentioned Berry buying their rents.
I'm sorry?
You mentioned Berry as an example of buying their rents.
Yeah.
A lot of people are very unhappy with this.
Okay.
The second option, would that make it more difficult for
Right.
conglomerate sort of prices then?
Let me repeat that. Thank you. I got the question. A lot of people are very unhappy about what's happening at Salford, and one League One chairman said to me last week, you know, do you realise that Salford are trying to buy their way to success? I said, I think so. We follow Salford fairly closely. And to give you an idea, probably the average salary in League Two, what would you say? 1,600, 1,700 a week? Or less?
Yeah, but slightly less.
Okay, so let's say 1,500 a week. That's a player wage, average, across the whole league. Not Leyton Orient, across the whole league. you know, the rumour from this guy was that Salford are offering people £6,000 a week. So that is an example, but this is where the definition comes in, because they have a billionaire owner who is pumping money in, and under the current definition, that is allowable. So that is the big question. Right, let's move on to the next question. I think we've already answered this one, but we'll see how good your memories are. Over the last 10 years, how much has player sales contributed to Leyton Orient? Got 3 choices here. Countdown, 13 seconds. Right, well, you got it right, because you heard the answer, it's just over 3 million. So we think the Academy's done a good job. And that number doesn't include some people who left, who we have what's called sell-on. So if a player left perhaps at the age of 14, we may have a 5% if the player gets sold by Tottenham to someone. Another player who got sold a couple of years ago, we have a 20% sell-on. You know, various players that left last summer, we have a sell-on. So these numbers obviously aren't included because they haven't happened. And one day we could get a big gain. I mean, that's why Martin, in my view, has done a brilliant job making sure the sell-on goes in. Because usually when you're negotiating, they're happy to do the sell-on because it's that day, they want to get the deal done. And Martin is a master at negotiating that. So, good job there, Martin.
Thank you. You're just a pretty face.
Right.
That's the arrogant side of me.
Next, okay, so we've already touched on this. How many times a year is the Briar Group Stadium pitch used? No, not many. We're using this year as a guide, so. These people are good at answering their questions, they're quick. Right, 3 seconds, here we go. You're actually both, it's about between 30 and 35 times, so it's about there, so that's right. So the next one's going to be controversial. We've already heard one person's answer. Before we show you, just some facts, which I didn't know until recently. Obviously in America, in the MLS, about 80% of the clubs play on artificial surfaces. In Scotland, I think it's about 80%. Is it right?
No, I don't think so.
Not that high?
No, they've got a few in Scotland. Quite a few.
And then in Holland, there's quite a few as well.
Yeah, loads, yeah.
Loads. Okay, so there's some. So the next question is, what kind of surface should we have, given that we don't use our stadium very often? By the way, if you don't know what a CIS pitch is, it's this pitch, mostly the Premier League clubs have it, where you have a plastic surface and the grass grows through it. It lasts a lot longer than plain grass.
It's about 5% astro, 95% grass.
I've heard it before, haven't I? You like this?
Right, here comes the answer.
Oh.
Wow.
Get it done. Few people can read CIS.
Okay, so CIS or another brand called Deso, they're basically the same. I think last year, from what I heard, 16 of the Premier League clubs had a CIS or Deso pitch.
Is that like the Borough Wood pitch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it?
Funded by Arsenal.
Funded by Arsenal.
Yeah.
So Bromley is 4G, right?
Correct.
Never been there.
Yeah.
Harrogate is 4G.
Yeah.
who else was 4G last year?
That's terrible.
Okay, so Danny, how many more times, I know this is a debatable thing and you know, we're going to talk to the CIS people, how many more times can you use the CIS pitch than grass?
A damn sight more than we currently do, but at least 2 times. We turn down every single week a chance to have film in here for an advert for whatever it is, advert or a film production for a film advert. Every single week we turn that down. It banes me to turn vital revenue down for the club, and we turn it down because we can't overuse that pitch.
Are there CIS pitches in the
What's the cost?
EFL? Yeah.
Championship. I don't know
So if Bromley had a CIS pitch and they got promoted, they could come into the EFL. Yeah. And you can use it for the other. It doesn't harm the pitch if you.
yeah, anyone can have a CIS or a Deso pitch. Yeah, and it just basically improves your surface and allows you
Presumably
to
it's
do more.
incredibly more expensive than the 4G.
Well, okay, so roughly to do this here, a 4G probably be,
It depends on what day of the week you speak to someone, but ultimately the cost is very similar. It's basically between 800 and a million.
now, by the way, I'm not saying you guys are wrong, and I think I'd probably vote the same way as you. I play with the kids I coach in the States on the artificial pitches all the time. They've come a long way. They are better than what I think you saw in the National League.
Yeah.
But there is an argument about that there could be more injuries on artificial pitches than grass pitches. But if you're worried about the sustainability of football, the right answer is probably the bottom.
Yeah.
The compromise answer is probably the middle. The middle is currently allowable. The bottom isn't in the EFL. But if we had the bottom one, we could have concerts, more concerts here. We could let people come and do what Danny said, do more commercials. People could have their work games here. We could bring in all the costs from the academy by bringing a lot of academy games in here, training. The bottom has a lot of economic advantages, but may have other issues with it. So I think this is going to be a big controversy, and I think the government are going to get involved because they are going to put pressure on the Football League to be more flexible in a number of areas. But I think we all agree we need to use the pitch more. Probably the compromise is a Deso CIS pitch.
I'll do at Spurs, I don't have 2, one of each.
Well, okay, yeah.
I think what you're going to see as well, I think that the 4G, I think will be voted back in for the Football League. I really do. Maybe not this year, because the simple fact is the economical side of it, I think it will. They are the best I've ever seen in terms of them. I don't like seeing the game on them, but I think the Football League, for the simple fact of finances, it will be voted back in eventually that you can use a full 4G.
Do you think if Bromley win the National League, that will be the turning point?
I think that could be the catalyst.
But they're a Deso and a thingy pitch.
No, they ain't.
I do say Bromley or Bournemouth.
Bromley.
Sorry, Bromley. Yes, sorry, yeah, that is it.
And for those who are not old enough to remember, Preston used to have an artificial pitch, didn't they, Charlie? QPR.
QPR can't play on this.
Yeah.
Luton.
Yeah. Right. Is it one more question? Okay, right. So we go back to the slides, so we'll have more Q&A soon. So the first thing we're very focused on getting non-match day, in other words, when we're not using the stadium, and the potential of some clubs is up to 2 million a year. Before we bought the club, the number was 50,000, was the highest ever. This year, thanks to Pa sitting at the back there, to Josh Stevens and Lucy Gammons, they are going to be heading towards 300,000, so 6 times the previous number. So a big round of applause, I think. Right, player sales. This is always in the model. Crew have obviously had a great record. A few other clubs. The trouble with this, in my view, it's a bit hit and miss. You can't plan on it. Streaming, we will hit about 100,000 on streaming this year, profit. And we believe we can get this up to about 300,000. Things like football for a fiver. We've had this discussion, a pitch more accepted to high use. And then we have other programs like the college program, which I'm not going to go into in the interest of time tonight, overseas camps, but this year we're going to run camps in Denmark, Massachusetts, third year running, New York, and
Possibly New Zealand.
What about in England on our doorstep?
Yeah, that's going to be going as well.
Watch this space.
Steve Edwards all over it.
Yeah. So
I think we need more in England locally.
We need both.
Yeah.
okay, so
More, because them boys ain't going to come over here and play.
No,
The boys here now.
I don't disagree, but the objective is that's a revenue generator as well as a branding thing over in the States or wherever it is. It's in hand over in. You're right, what you said, you're right.
the talent we use the academy for.
I want to see boys on the pitch scoring goals.
So that's the academy.
But that's the academy.
Yeah. I want to see more of it.
But you're not going to get that from this. As they say, this is
This-
about
the-
money and about building the brand. This
That
is
element
about
is a
bringing
gift. That
players.
element is and it's Martin's team that leads with us. I won't steal the thunder. It's a revenue generator. You might find by a miracle a gen, but that's not anywhere near an objective. It's to generate revenue so that we can do things like develop the academy.
On
We all want to see that.
Steve Edwards, who's leading that at the moment, has also got on his, or a request from me, is that we do need to see the Leighton Orient soccer schools more locally. So at the moment they do a Theos over at Ives Farm, but Steve's going to have 3 or 4 running in the location of around the stadium, like Walthamstow, that type of area. But that's something that we feel that's been let go over the last few years, that's for sure.
100%.
Okay.
Because there's been an argument on the streaming side that if a game is, if the team you're playing is more than 100 miles, say, away from where the match is, that you can start to stream games on a Saturday.
Okay, so we'd love to do that. We've suggested it, but there is a rule, European rule, isn't it?
Yes, about EU directive, and you think coming out of Brexit tomorrow, that's not going to cure that one because it's an FA and EFL regulation.
It was a UK law before the EU.
Yeah, so it's very much to protect the
But if we had a game on a Sunday, you can.
any time outside of 2:45 to 5:15 on a Saturday.
Man.
Right, let's keep going. Next slide. Oh, I can do that. Okay, so here's our revenue split. And rather than ask you, so match day is about 43%. Non-match day, that's all the stuff we gave a round of applause to Parr and others. Football is the payout here. So interesting, the majority of the money from TV for the Football League goes to the Championship, 12% goes to League One, and 8% to League Two. So everyone in League Two gets 10 million, which sounds a nice number when you say it, but divide that by 24 clubs, that's not very much. The Academy, we get revenue, a lot of it from effectively the FA. And then the commercial side, which we've included streaming, which is obviously sponsorship and things like that, as well as streaming, is 14%. So we work very hard on that. We think non-match day is the big growth area. Colchester United make about 1.9 million. So this is an area that we think we can expand. We think we can expand that. We've not got on this chart player sales because we don't budget for that. And I think that's wise because, you know, if you put it in and Dan Happy suddenly breaks his leg, I just hope it never happens, you look a bit stupid because you've got a big hole in the budget. Question, Karen?
You say about Colchester making 1.9. Do you know what sort of pitch they've got? Because if they've got a grass pitch, I drive past there fairly often to go and see my in-laws, and they've always got these bands on there all the time. And they're advertising.
It's indoors, I think.
I have the displeasure of living close to it. It's all internal stuff. They have one concert a year, something like Elton John or someone, which we will want to replicate. Most of what they do is indoors. It's a phenomenal business model that we would love to have
They've got
half of
convenience.
it.
They've got convenience with the parking, which we ain't.
They have some markets as well, don't they?
No, it's mainly from their tribute nights and
Yeah.
we've got lots of them.
But it's inside, isn't it?
Yeah, all the time. Part of it.
Okay, I'm going to throw out a controversial subject here. Look out there. Remember, I grew up in the playground with Barry Hearn, who kicked me to death several times.
Emptied his pockets.
Yeah. And we either supported Leyton Orient, Tottenham, West Ham. One idea we came up with, when West Ham are at home and we're not at home, should we do hospitality here
Yes.
for West Ham?
Yes.
I think we should. I mean, it's revenue to keep us going, right?
Yeah, it's going to line our pockets.
Line our
Line our
pockets.
pockets,
Okay, so that's 100%, right.
They're scrapping me, mate.
All right, we're going on now. Another question? Right, okay, so this is a question for all of you, because I want to get your input. So, suddenly, out of the blue, we might sell a player, we may get a sell-on, someone donates, someone dies and leaves it to the club, we get 2 million. You have to decide, do we put it into supporting our financial losses, in other words, reducing the loss? Do we go out and buy some players? Do we invest in the infrastructure, such as the training ground, the stadium, ticketing systems, and by the way, new ticketing systems coming soon, the pitch, or save it for a rainy day? You have to vote on what, and because the easy answer is to say do some of everything, we want to know what your preference is. 13 seconds. Huh?
Yeah. It's not going to be the top two or the bottom one.
Yeah, Martin's right. I think if you want my view, I would, obviously we've got things to do here. We always believe we need new players. And I believe it, not just him, I believe it. I think as an element of this, and if we go on to my next slide, I'll come back and answer this, the one after next. So this is what we told the EFL. I'm going to rattle through this. Toughen up the owners and directors test to avoid certain people coming in. We all agree with that, right? Yeah. Been there and done it. Number 2. This is my idea, which they kind of liked. If you come to Dunkin' or Baskin Robbins or Papa John's and know nothing about it, we don't just say go out and start operating. We have a group of people who help and train and advise. We think potential owners need that. We were lucky we had Martin and Matt Poulter. Rick Parry liked that idea. Next one. A hard salary cap. We talked about that before. I've suggested 40%. In the paper they sent us this week, they talked about adding all kinds of other costs in. We think it should be focused on players. In American sports, it's very focused on players, and the cap is a hard salary cap, not tied to revenue. Now, we agreed in here earlier we should tie it to revenue, but if you remember, very strong definitions about what revenue is. The next one, so I'll keep going, sorry. Right, we also said, and this is really the definition, that you can't just sell your stadium and that goes in as revenue. That's what that's all about. Next one, thanks. Any overspending would result in a fine, and they're looking at this, and I suggested to the league that if Derby County, for instance, got fined, it should be into a fund for ground improvement for all clubs. In other words, the money just doesn't disappear, it's used for the benefit of football.
But if you've got a club that's got into financial difficulties because of overspending, and you fine them, don't you just make that
You probably do.
worse?
Yeah, and
Is it the points that really matter?
well, we've also, our proposal, which remember I wrote this weeks ago before we had all the discussions with the EFL, is I suggested every 100,000 overspend would result in a 2-point deduction.
And some from the fans, really.
Pardon?
Some from the fans of those clubs, really. They're the ones that get the brunt of that.
Okay, so what would you do?
You have to do something.
You have to do some. You have to give some punishment.
You go and do a crime if there wasn't punishment for
The
it.
fans getting punished for something that's not their fault.
But what is the alternative? It's sad, but what is the alternative? The club goes under or gets to a stage where it can't pay?
Well, they may go under with deductions anyway.
They might do, but there has to be a punishment there. Otherwise, clubs will do it left, right, centre. You won't have staff paid.
There's not a possibility the EFL could take control of that club.
Well,
and
okay.
then sell that club.
Okay, so let's
That
talk.
might be a better option.
Okay, let me talk about that because someone said that to me the other night. In America, the league would take over the club, as you just said. I don't think that could happen in this country because you imagine that, let's make up a club, Macclesfield Town gets taken over by the league. We play a week on Saturday and they brought in some new players. The league are put in a no-win situation. So I don't think that can happen. I think the point here is something has to happen, but I agree with you, it's not easy from a fan point of view. Right, next one. Failure to pay players would result in a deduction of 2 points. Multiple times. I think we agree with that. Number 7. We're saying that we should encourage these pitches. I think the consensus in the room, which I tend to agree with practically, is CIS and DESO, that the EFL should go to those suppliers and get a bulk discount, because that could bring the cost down. Next one. Again, taking some ideas from my franchising world, we should have some advisors to help clubs improve their financial situation. Perhaps we need it. Next. Lobby the government for relief on the alcohol restrictions for football. In other words, you cannot drink in the view of the pitch. You can't stand up at that window and watch the game. And Danny, you think that's worth how much a game?
If 5,000 people, say 1,000 people bought a drink, it's 150 grand a year profit.
So, nearly 10% of our losses. Right, next one.
The other thing to say on that is, it's only, in the whole history of this ban, has anybody in a private box ever been fined for drinking?
They're not allowed to drink it.
They're not allowed unless they put the blinds down. Have they ever been fined or thrown out of the ground for having the blinds open? It's nonsense. I'm not having a drink of alcohol in a football ground here or anywhere until they resolve that. Because that was just part of that blame of blaming the Liverpool supporters.
We totally agree, and I think there has to be pressure on the government to change it. Americans can't believe it. I mean, you go to an NFL game, they drink all the time. Rugby, cricket. Alright, last one I think we fixed was the mobile issues to do with streaming. Was a few tweaks we'd make to our app, but if you haven't tried it, Leighton Orient TV is working pretty well. And one more slide. Right, so this is our board vision, which kind of answers the question we put up earlier. This is what I do going down the road. We have to get Leighton Orient back to 0 as fast as possible by growing revenue, looking at some costs. I personally think we have to be careful going too hard on costs, but we clearly need to do something because we can't keep sustaining the kind of losses I talked about. Number 2, the league has a lot to do. I think we all agree, based on what we've discussed tonight, and the meeting's coming up. There's a meeting on Tuesday, there's a meeting in February. I think there will be fast change from the league. And lastly, if this is what I would do, if we got a big windfall, say we suddenly got from a transfer 5 million, I would put it on one side because we're talking about sustainability. I'd certainly give something to Martin. I'd certainly fix some of the issues we have around the ground. But I think we've been to the edge once. We can't go there again. But this could be like a, you know, my wife's on the board of a school. They call it a endowment. It could be a trust. It could be put away money. Call it what you like. But I think you need to save money for a rainy day. So that's what I would do. I'd balance